Hello and welcome to the TelecomTV Summit on the Green Network. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content. Network operators have multiple reasons to become more sustainable, not least of which is to help reduce their operational expenses. But how can they achieve these goals? How can the industry develop and deploy the green networks of the future? Well, to find out, I'm delighted to welcome Arash Ashuria, who is SVP Group Technology Innovation with Deutsche Telekom and also Chairman of the Board of the NGMN Alliance. Arash, very good to see you again. Now, you joined us last month as part of the Great Telco Debate series, and I first want to pick up on some of the points you made there. As you mentioned during the debate, Deutsche Telekom is committed to being net zero by 2025 and net zero across the entire supply chain by 2040. Now, your own target, just 3 years away, is bold and positive, but why does it take so long for the entire supply chain? That's almost 20 years away. What are the obstacles that we face here?
Yes, so indeed, we have been quite ambitious setting those targets, but obviously we need to differentiate. When we talk about net zero by 25 is scope 1 and scope 2, which is what we have under our own control, which we can manage, and we are very determined to achieve that goal as soon as possible. When we talk about scope 3 and the entire supply chain, we are actually talking about everything which is happening outside of our direct control within the supply chain, which is quite complex and is very diverse, giving us as a converged player. So actually we did an analysis, and if you look, 85% of our entire emission is coming from scope 3, which is not under our direct control. And we did a detailed analysis how we want to address that, how to work with our suppliers to basically first line them up on a joint objective and a common deadline. Second, line them up on a phased plan how we want to achieve that goal, and make sure that they go back and line up their first tier and second tier suppliers to ensure that from an end-to-end perspective, we achieve the same target. What we also did, there is an initiative called Joint Audit Co-Creation, JAC, and where we are with other, I think 17, out of my head, 17 operators are in that, are working with a lot of like 200 tier 1 suppliers in order to address that in a common way in terms of what we want to make sure there is sustainability across the entire mobile communication place. Now, talking about one important element you mentioned is that if you look at the supply chain, there's a lot of diversity, and with diversity comes A, complexity, and B, transparency. So actually we are investing significant amount of time, resources, and efforts to understand, and basically it's like pile the onion, understand the end-to-end supply chain, the service chain, so that we can be much more effective with the way we put the measures to address those.
So obviously, Arash, you want to work with your suppliers and work with the supply chain, but is there sufficient diversity in the telecoms supply chain to enable you to select partners and suppliers based on their green credentials and performance? Are you able to perhaps drop out suppliers because they're not moving fast enough or helping you with your green network goals?
I think that's an excellent question. And there are two different elements I like to elaborate. First one is that we have been, and we, as some of you might know, we have a procurement alliance together with Orange. And the two companies under that alliance, we have now set a set of criteria, sustainability criteria, which we will measure and benchmark as part of any RFQ we are having in the future. Why we do that is very simple. If you want to address sustainability in the most impactful way, you need to make sure that suppliers, our strategic suppliers, understand that it matters how much they can contribute to our goals, and that this becomes a significant part of the sourcing criteria next to the usual strategic fit, operational requirements, and obviously commercials. So that's number one. That's in work in progress, and we hope that there is a lot of impact by that. And obviously, the result of that is that when we do an RFQ and we compare vendor A or supplier A with supplier B, assume that in terms of operational fit, strategic fit, and commercials, there is very little room between. Then, of course, the sustainability element will make the difference, and we are very certain to make sure that that message is understood across the marketplace. To me, that's number one. Number two is, you said diversity. I couldn't agree more. The whole reason we are putting so much efforts and we put the money where our mouth is in terms of resources, and now even launching an RFQ for disaggregation, both in fixed with our Access 4.0 concept, as well as with Open RAN in the mobile space, is exactly to go and diversify the whole vendor landscape, make sure that on the hardware layer, wherever possible, we can reuse and use the scaling effect of IT, classical IT hardware, rather than purpose-built, and make sure that because of that disaggregation, we get many new suppliers, which brings diversity. These suppliers want to compete, want to differentiate. Now, if we combine one, sourcing criteria, and two, the technological evolution, which gives the opportunity to have more diversified vendor landscape, which can then compete, then I think we have the perfect case of making a huge impact and progress.
Good to hear. Now, one of the issues that came up during the great telco debate on the Green Network was the lack of industry-wide metrics and reporting standards. Can our industry come to some kind of collective agreement here, or do we have to rely on possible future regulation?
Well, see, if you look at sustainability as a subject, there are again two things, right? One is the cause, which I always go and on every stage I say is a responsibility of a necessity as each individuals and as a business leader, and you want to create impact. And then the other thing is there's a competitive edge to it. Now that the topic is on everyone's agenda, everyone wants to, every company, every business wants to show what they are doing. And there is a level of differentiation. Now, we have, if you look at our industry, there are many different initiatives. But one of the things I brought up together with Anita in NGMN was, if we put competition aside for a moment, at least in a pre-competitive way, and think about the objective, the only way we can really create an impact is to join forces. If we want the suppliers to significantly invest money in R&D to improve energy consumption, even though we are the leading European telco, and with the help of our T-Mobile US friends, we are one of the biggest operators, we can only create a certain level of impact. And if other operators would join, there is much more force power, and on the other side, from the supplier perspective, there is more in stake, so their business case will work in investing and determining. Now, industry collaboration has many aspects. One is sharing best practice on thinking, or of course everything pre-competitive. I think competitiveness will be on the service experience and the speed and the level of execution and determination at the later stage. So there is a best practice sharing, but there is also another element which I like to elaborate on, which is understanding and coming in agreement with metrics which gonna make us or make sustainability, energy saving, green networks measurable. And the analogy I would like to draw here is, at the early stages of 2G, there was no standard, no nothing for how you measure network quality. And there have been companies Actually, it started a lot of, which is now the word standard, came out of Germany, of a company called P3 back then, which has set up criterias and did benchmarking, and over time that benchmarking has become the de facto world industry standard, and as far as I remember, it was even introduced into standardization. So what we are doing is we are using again NGMN as the home for operators and the partner ecosystem, while we work close with other industry bodies to drive that from the industry perspective. I mean, we have full alignment with ITU, GSMA, and other bodies to drive. I think we are still in an early stage. There's a lot of work needs to be done. And since some of it is a bit competitive, because everyone wants to be best and wants to show that I am more sustainable, it's a bit, as I would say, it's a way to go. But we are determined to go that path. And you mentioned regulation. I don't think we need regulation. The area where we need government support is, of course, enabling much easier use, both economically, it's also in terms of availability of renewable energies, to enable it for the operator community to much faster adopt wherever we are in the world, renewable energies. That's how I see it.
Great, thanks, Arash. As you say, there's still a lot of work to be done. Now, leading on from this, there appears to be a lot of hope resting on the next generation of network technology, with a promise of it being substantially more cost effective and cheaper to run and more sustainable. On the one hand, you could look at that as just pushing the problem further away from today to be dealt with later. But I guess on the other hand, if new innovations can indeed produce green savings of several orders of magnitude, then how can we accelerate their introduction into today's commercial networks?
Again, very good question. I mean, look, the paradigm is that actually, unlike the disbelief, and I saw this in press a lot, actually, if you look at 5G from the standpoint of energy consumption per megabit, is the most efficient mobile technology ever existed. The issue is, with the new frequency bands, you need densification, which is you need much more. You need to deploy much more radio out there, and of course, the traffic growth is going through the roof, which ultimately means we will consume more energy. Now, there have been many low-hanging fruits for all the operators who are always keen in adopting the latest level of technology, pushing for innovation, doing joint innovation with the leading mobile suppliers in terms of latest feature set, the rich level of feature set in terms of energy savings, and some basic machine learning, very basic AI in terms of how to manage traffic and load, particularly during non-peak times and in the night. It were low-hanging fruits. A lot of operators are adopting, and I hope that as the notion of sustainability becomes the fundamental goal across the globe, that other operators will follow. The other thing is with the new technologies, and the great example is actually in the fixed area, is that if you are determined to do a radical transformation and you look at that business case, there are again multiple triggers. One is you use the technology life cycle, which always is linked to an investment need to invest and modernize the network and improve your energy footprint. Or like the way we did for the all IP program, even before I joined Deutsche Telekom, was that we looked at the business case and we said, we're going to pre-invest and we're going to get rid of legacy. We're going to move brutally over years of transformation into full IP, because ultimately, first of all, there is a massive cost benefit and simplification of our production model and much better reliable service. And secondly is we will, and this was many years ago, before sustainability became such a hot topic, but we did that in order to have also a much better footprint going forward. Now, if you look at all of this, where the development goes on the part of 6G, I think there is much more we can do with the usage of AI. And I think it's essential that from a requirements perspective, and I mentioned early on, sourcing, incentivizing those who go the extra miles, who invest the R&D to come up with new features, that this is something which is, again, as much as possible, is done holistically across the industry.
Now, it was only a few months ago that NGMN published its white paper on green future networks and network energy efficiency. It covered a wide range of scenarios and options in a lot of detail. So it's obvious that there's so much that could be done. You've just spoken about how to accelerate some of these technologies and get them into our networks today. Is one approach perhaps to mandate some of these approaches and technologies, get them hard bake them into the standards process?
I think you just mentioned NGMN. We have to acknowledge one fact or one reality, which is different operators operate at different geographies. And within those geographies, even those who are globally, they have areas where they are still rolling out 4G, just to give you an example. So they are at different level of the technology they're using in the network, and a complete different level of local regulation and a local country-based agenda, particularly if you look outside of Europe, agenda on what are the country's objectives in terms of sustainability. And this always means that whatever all the white papers, the speed of implementation, it always also depends on, or will differ from operator to operator. Obviously, the intention and the way NGMN have been working, even going back to the 4G times, and particularly with the 5G papers, is to be the thought leader, to make sure they are a set of requirements calling out the industry to follow, and ultimately use the entire standardization body ecosystem to turn whatever idea, wherever feasible, into a standard, so that it becomes mandatory on the other side when you purchase or when you deploy an architecture. So on one side, standardization wherever feasible, absolutely, and we focus on that. And I will welcome everyone's contribution into that, because it's not just the operator, it's the entire ecosystem. Are the classical suppliers, are the new challengers, as well as all the associate companies, even semiconductors who basically don't have necessarily direct relationship with the operator, but play a fundamental part. And on the other side, it's all about making sure that so first of all, appreciating that the implementation level will differ, and having that constant dialogue and exchange, those who are be fast to share the experience and maybe hurdles with those who still are ahead of a 5G, for example, a deployment or any fiber deployment or IPification program, so that they can reuse those thoughts and experiences to have a faster and more efficient implementation for their own markets.
Arash, it's been a fascinating discussion, but I've got one final question for you. What's your main message to the industry? What's the most important step, or what's the most important steps we can take collectively to enable green networks?
I hear often when we talk about sustainability or environment, we always talk about the future, and we paint we paint a very dark future of this will happen and this could happen for our children or grandchildren. The reality is we are already facing significant extreme weather conditions. I mean, I don't need to name them, but what happened here in Germany with that flash flood, killing so many people and also destroying big part of our network in that area. So I don't want it. One thing is you look into the future and paint a picture. The other thing is happening now and is already impacting even the business. So there is a responsibility as a human being and as leader, but then there's the business side. So it's impacted. We have lost thousands of sites, the entire fixed and mobile network in all the areas of the flood. And you see all around the world, tornado, hurricane, flood, massive higher level seas. So we have to act now. And it's not for tomorrow, it's for yesterday. We have to act now. And this I say from the bottom of my heart, number one. Number two is, if we want to create the impact, the more we collaborate as an industry, operator community, vendor community, and within the vendor community, their suppliers, particularly the semiconductors and some other elements. We have to work based on a common objectives. Yes, acknowledging there will be a level of competition, which is good because innovation also comes through competition. So of course, everyone wants to be better. But if you look at this and analyze this, there is still a lot we can do in a pre-competitive manner to driving in the same direction, creating the scales so that we can create the impact. And finally, in terms of the goal of net zero, we need to use every technology possible. We need to use advanced AI. I have a specific example. So in terms of peak management and non-peak management, we are doing a lot of things which are super innovative, but if you look at the potential of AI, they are still, in my view, relatively basic. So we need to open up, obviously within a value, with a clear boundaries, to AI and other new technologies to drive, use technology innovation to drive consistently and create, and again, I repeat myself, incentives for the suppliers to go the extra miles, to invest in R&D. If we do the benchmarking so that they can also differentiate themselves, and they should know that in the very near future, starting 2022, it does matter even for the sourcing decisions.
And as you say, Arash, we need to act now. All of us need to act now. Arash, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this year's Green Network Summit.
My pleasure.